Let's bring in our think tank tonight, put some perspective on all this. Criminal defense attorney Suri Chada Jimenez with us, and Andrew Lynch in New York City, trial attorney Kelly Hyman, and criminal defense attorney Matthew Maddox. Welcome to you all. Great to have you aboard. Let me begin in New York City. Kelly Hyman, ladies first here tonight. What do you think happened here? She broke down, could not continue. Was the moment too much? Why do you think that we are where we are tonight, not even knowing if she'll be able to finish her testimony?
I think being under cross-examination is extremely exhausting, no matter who you are, and ask questions over and over again is emotionally exhausting for someone. And then to relive a sexual assault based on what she said is just enough for someone to break down. Now, who she was talking about, the sexual assault, I think we'll find out tomorrow and get some more information. But it's very tough for a woman coming forward with the allegations she brings, and it's quite exhausting. Absolutely.
Matthew Maddox, let me ask you a question here. What if she is not able to come back to the courthouse? What if she cannot continue her testimony? What happens?
That's a great question, Vinny. Certainly, look, the defense has a right to cross-examination. It's a constitutional right to cross-examine accusers. I don't frankly know what the remedy is other than a delay in the trial of whatever time period may be required. Obviously not extensive, but hours, a day. But there's an absolute right to cross-examination and confront accusers. And the trial can't continue without the defense having that right exhausted on behalf of Mr. Weinstein.
Suri, if she's not able to come back and testify, is it possible that the charges associated with her could be dismissed and her testimony stricken?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that's very out there. There's no way that she's not going to come back. It's going to be very tough. The judge might have to accommodate.
Well, let me tell you what the judge said today, Suri, just so you know. He said, prosecutors, if you don't have a witness ready for us first thing in the morning, it's time for you to rest your case. The judge is not going to accept any delays here.
Well, I would call for a mistrial immediately if I'm the defense, because they have a right to confront the witness, and they're not done. They have a lot of questions. The judge might want to guide them and move them along, but you can't just stop it. They still have so many things that are unanswered. What's going on with her past? What's going on with all this communication she has had? Their inconsistencies. They have a right to cross-examine, and it's not pressure on the prosecutors. It is the right of the defendant. So no, she has to come back, and they can make her come back. They can arrest her. They can force her to be put on the stand because she is under subpoena.
Andrew, if she's not able to testify, can the defense, because this is an aggressive defense team, they make motions for a mistrial and things every single day almost inside their courtroom. Do you think the defense will make a motion to have the charges dismissed because she does not return to the stand?
I just don't think the judge is going to dismiss the charges. I think that she will come back. I think the more important thought is, can the state meet their burden of proof? They have the duty to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. One of their main witnesses, one of the two victims off the indictment, if she doesn't come back, if she doesn't face these attorneys, if she is not able to be confronted, I think it could be a very powerful and damaging blow to the state's case. I think it's one that they may not be able to recover from. If you look at their case, they seem to be constantly overreaching and bringing more and more history into the case rather than focusing on the victims that they have. And I think it would be an incredibly damaging problem for them if they can't present the evidence that should be in front of this jury to this jury in the morning and allow Mr. Weinstein his opportunity to confront this person.
Kelly, let me ask you, Kelly Hyman in New York City tonight, will the jury interpret this that she's being victimized again on the witness stand? Because this breakdown, not coming during direct, coming through the cross-examination.
You know, that's a very good point. A lot of times when someone's been a victim of sexual assault and having to go through the cases, whether it's your deposition and sit for your deposition, you're re-traumatizing the person again of going through these details. And then on the witness stand as well, being traumatized as well. And yes, that's, it's a thin line but when you cross-examine someone, whether to really bully them, because then the person can really come off, the person who's being cross-examined as a victim again. So it's a very fine line for Harvey's defense team to ask her the right questions. But I think she'll definitely be back. I mean, the judge can also, just get police and have them go to her and bring her back. I definitely think she'll come back tomorrow, and they'll continue and maybe take more breaks during the time period to accommodate her.
All right, when we come back, another thing I want to talk about with our think tank tonight, and that's the way this trial is playing out. These prosecution witnesses, one after another, models, actresses, people who want to break into the music, the entertainment industry. You're talking about beautiful people. That's for the prosecution. Then you look at the counsel table for the defense, and what do you see? You see Harvey Weinstein. Beauty's in the beast. How does this play with the jury? We'll talk about it next. Added to the prosecution roster of witnesses today, an Italian model, Emanuela Postacini. There she is. She's going to testify about an alleged threesome. There you go. All right, let's bring back in our think tank tonight. Quick survey. Who believes that looks count when it comes to a jury judging the credibility of witnesses?
I do.
We got two. Let's begin. Andrew Lynch. How much of an impact is that going to have in this case?
It's going to have an impact. It matters. I've tried cases, and it's just a fact that jurors have to pay attention. Trials are long. The more presentable the witnesses, the better they do. The more people care to listen to what they have to say. The reality is these witnesses are trained at presenting information. They are trained at acting. They are trained models, actresses. People are going to want to listen to what they have to say. It matters.
Sir, is it going to make a difference here?
Sadly, it makes a difference, but I think the problem that I have is that we are focusing too much on their looks. Yes, we have the whole contrast, the juxtaposition.
Not just their looks, his looks also.
Exactly. So beautiful woman and just Harvey. But we have to remember, and I think the prosecution needs to make a bigger point about this. It is not only about the sex and the attraction and how that he just can't control himself around them. It is about control. It is about using them. That's what he's doing to them. They're just a tool for him. So he goes out there and he tries to find the ones that he can manipulate, that he can coerce, because not every actress is going to fall for this. And as we have seen from the story of the prosecution is telling, he grooms them. He's nothing more than a pimp.
Matthew Maddox, from your perspective, the defense acknowledged this fact during jury selection. I'm not making this up out of thin air. Do you think it ends up being a factor with this jury?
I think that people's aesthetics and our interest and our tendency to pay attention to other human beings who are attractive looking, more symmetrical is primal, Vinny. It is absolutely primal. It is wired in our genes. Having said that, the defense's narrative here, a theme throughout their narrative must be that these women, despite how physically attractive they were attracted to Harvey Weinstein because of his power, because of what he could do for them. That's their narrative, and they have to be able to talk about that, and that's what they have to do in their cross-examination in order to build that narrative.
Kelly, does it make a difference that the prosecution has surrounded this case with one witness after another out of literally central casting? It's unreal. They've added now an Italian model to this whole thing who's going to talk about a threesome. Will that make a difference, the fact that the people who are delivering the evidence for prosecutors are all beautiful?
I think it does play a role. I think it was very smart of the defense counsel to bring it up in the beginning and let people know that that's going to be an issue. But more importantly, we really hope that people will listen to the evidence and evaluate it and make their determination based on the evidence and the facts. And I believe that the jury will do that, no matter how beautiful the woman is.
Matthew Maddox, there's a fine line between being who Harvey Weinstein's being portrayed as. I mean, do you see him as pathetic, or do you see him as kind of like a controlling monster?
Well, regardless of how I see him differently than probably the way a jury may see him. We see him differently. The question is, how does the jury look at this guy? And I think we've got completely antithetical themes here. We've got the prosecution theme that he is a controlling monster, a perverse controlling monster, and we have the defense theme that he is a man who, yes, was in a position of power, but women were attracted to him because of his power. How I see him, I see the contrast. The contrast is stark. But the question is, does the jury understand, and is the jury going to really overcome doubt here as far as how these relationships developed and what the basis was of those relationships?
Andrew, is the cross-examination going to be enough for the defense in this case, or do they need to put perhaps the man who is in the middle of all this, Harvey Weinstein, on the stand to give a different perspective on what was happening?
I would have to think twice and a third time about putting him on the stand. The reality is he's presumed innocent. They've done an excellent job through documenting through emails and the history between him and these women that there may be a motive other than the motive that the state's presenting. His attorneys have done an excellent job of that. If they put the defendant up, it's really going to boil down to whether or not the jurors believe him. The reality is if he testifies, the presumption of innocence, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, all of that might just go out the window in the juror's mind, and it'll boil down to whether or not they believe Harvey is telling the truth. Right now, they have a real issue with their witnesses and whether or not they had a motive to take advantage of this man. And I do understand the power dynamic, but I also understand that these people did have something to gain from him. And it's not whether or not he did these things. It's not proof by preponderance of the evidence. It's the highest standard we have. The highest standard is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And there is a motive here for these people to make, exaggerate, or remember facts. And that has got to be their defense. It's got to be the defense from now till the end. Some things happened, but Harvey, they cannot prove that he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
All right, you've heard from us. Time for us to hear from you. Social media reaction next. Jessica Mann on the stand today. It all ended with her breaking down emotionally, could not answer a question, and she was whisked out of the courtroom. The jury was sent out, and we'll see if she is able to continue tomorrow with her testimony. That was a big question mark at the end of the day. Incredible reaction today on social media. Let's get right to it. We begin with Pauletta with our comment of the day. In my opinion, the gig's up. Based on what I've seen and heard, this has to be a devastating blow to the prosecution. It's looking obvious to me Ms. Mann is disgruntled. After all, she made it to the casting couch, not the big screen. I'd be upset too if I degraded myself for that disgusting, dirty old man to help me further my career and still have a name unknown. I'm sorry, but I don't believe she's a victim, and she's making it bad for those who are. Just my opinion. All right, Matthew Maddox, what if this jury believes that, yeah, she did all these things and is now disgruntled? I mean, she degraded herself. Harvey Weinstein's urinating on her, yet she doesn't make it big. Could they believe that's the reason that she's testifying the way she is?
I don't think this jury is going to speak or think in terms of whether she's disgruntled or bitter. I think that commentator is, or that individual who posted that comment is off base. I think the jury will question, or could question, to what extent she was actually a victim. We may talk about this later, but that is all trumped, however, by her ultimate breakdown. We can talk about that later. I don't know whether you will, Vinny, but that moment when you allow a witness to just simply go on and narrate, let alone about such intensely personal, amazingly and shockingly, stunningly emotional issues, you allow a witness to just keep galloping like that, you're asking for trouble.
Mickey writing tonight, heartbreaking. I don't blame her. She has millions of people picking apart her story and life, most of them like these people on Facebook saying she did it for the money and fame for which she has none. The most recognition she has gotten is from this trial, which is not the attention she was going for at the time. I feel for her. Kelly, how about the fact that she never made it big? How about the fact that she is not known? What does that mean? What does that tell us about what she is telling this jury?
Well, you all think about why someone does something. Like, what, is there, or there's a motive to do something? Is that, is she really upset or disgruntled because she didn't become, famous? Or is she, someone that was really harmed and victimized, and because of that is having a very difficult time with the situation? So it's really important to look at that, and I think that's something the jury is going to make the ultimate determination on. Why is she a victim? Or is there some kind of motive and she was mad at him and this is, her payback to him? And also, I think there's another issue of concern about consent. A lot of people will look at her correspondence and communication and say, that, beforehand you had this consensual relationship and then afterwards you did, but you were raped. And sometimes people will have a hard time, with that fact as well. And I think that ultimately will be a big issue for the jurors to make a determination of whether it was consensual. And the defense is really trying to hit hard on that, everything, these relationships were consensual and that they were getting a benefit from him, going to these Oscar parties, going to shows, traveling around. So ultimately, we'll see what the jury makes a determination on, guilty or innocent.
Scarlett writing tonight, just imagine if the judge has to strike this testimony. 2 days. No wonder people will try to get out of jury duty. God bless all the jurors who stick it out. Suri, I'm coming back to you on this one. You don't think there's any chance that this testimony could be stricken from the record?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think that she's going to come through. She's already put herself out there, and she's so brave, and she's gonna just come back and suffer through this again. Looking at this trial, I feel like a bit of a baby lawyer. Like, is this really going to be effective? Like, destroying and traumatizing a victim is really going to help you? And maybe it is. Maybe I just don't know. Just don't have enough experience. But it does bother me a lot that in essence, we are buying this defense argument of unwanted consensual sex. That's not a thing. You can't have unwanted consent. It's unwanted. There's no consent. And the reason it's a problem is because he's in a position of power and they're not. And that's where the lack of consent is. You cannot have a consensual relationship when somebody has so much power over you and they keep working for him. Of course, who else are going to work for? What, they're going to go to McDonald's? This is their career. They have no choice. They have to put themselves through rape so they can work. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. They just think they're getting a benefit. That's not a benefit. They never wanted to do this.
Well stated. Doreen writing tonight, why didn't the other witness and accusers mention his deformity? Either they are lying or she is. Someone has to be. Andrew, let me go to you on this. We haven't heard that from any of the other witnesses. I do believe, though, this accusation is the latest in time. It's like 2013, continues to 2016. So I think these are the most recent accusations. The other accusers, Annabelle Shiori, you go back to the 90s. Is it possible that she's telling the truth and maybe this is a recent development with Harvey Weinstein?
I think it's absolutely possible, probable, and she probably is telling the truth. I don't think there's an issue in this trial of whether or not she would be at a vantage point to see what she's describing. Witnesses remember things differently, even witnesses who see it at the same time. You're talking about witnesses over a decade, years passing between the multiple people testifying. So absolutely she would have an opportunity to see this. And more importantly, I don't think the defense is taking the position that she wouldn't have an opportunity to see this. Now, whether or not it was so traumatic, whether or not it's a deformity, whether or not it's something remarkable, that's a different question, but absolutely she would have an opportunity to see this, and memories do change.
And if it's not true, the defense will have an opportunity to put Harvey Weinstein and his anatomy on the stand. Jamie, how in the world did prosecutors put this woman on the stand? She had to have known the defense had the goods in her. The state needs to get it together or rest. She's a complaining witness, Matthew. They had to put her on the stand, otherwise they wouldn't have an indictment here.
Of course, they had no choice but to put her on the stand and let everything out, shine the light on everything, be as transparent as possible. There's absolutely no choice. You don't, as you know, Vinny, as prosecutors can't choose their witnesses. They can't choose their victims and their complaining witnesses. They come forward and you deal with the witness as that witness is presented to you, including narratives, including emails, including communications, including whatever might be used to cross-examine or try to impeach that witness. You put it out there, you let everybody see it, and you deal with it as it comes up in front of the jury.
All right, Tony writing tonight and sounding a lot like my friend Joey Jackson. He used to say this to me all the time. Vinny, Vinny, Vinny. That's how he would start every comment to me. Anyway, no compassion. She puts this all on herself. She wanted her name out there one way or the other. Now she can't handle it. She's totally transparent, of course. She kept seeing him in hopes of getting a big part. She just can't bring herself to say the words and admit it. She is actually pathetic. Now, I'm not sure if it's Tony with an I. Tony may be a woman. I'm not sure. Kelly Hyman, you know, this is difficult. I mean, if a juror thinks that she's pathetic, prosecution case, I mean, half their case ended today.
No, absolutely. That's, a very good point. Do they believe her? Do they not believe her? And so ultimately the jury's going to make that, determination. Everyone's entitled to their opinions, but let's remember we shouldn't victimize a victim again. Having to go through the trial, having your deposition taken, being on the witness stand, having your whole life examined, people looking at your emails, questioning everything you did. That is a very difficult place for any person to go through or to experience that. And let's the jury make their decision and ultimately make the determination and leave it up to them.
Rose writing tonight, over 100 women accusing Weinstein of sexual assault. Well, it was sexual assault and sexual harassment. And the prosecution chooses Jessica Mann as their star witness. Well, it has to be someone within the statute of limitations, within the jurisdiction of this prosecuting office. So they don't have a choice of 100 women. Mann will lose the case for them. She's obviously mentally ill. She broke down today. I don't know her mental status and should never have been made to testify. By the way, the prosecution would be in a better place had they a male attorney to give some balance. Matthew Maddox, do you think the gender of the prosecutor in a case like this makes a difference?
I think that that's a popular idea. I think it's even a popular misconception amongst lawyers. I don't think they needed a female to cross-examine this particular witness or any of the witnesses. In fact, I was even thinking and saying off camera that I find Ms. Rotundo's methods and her cadence and her pitch not very effective. I think a man can do this just as well as a woman can, but you've got to do it very methodically, very quietly. And the last thing you need to do is have a young female, provoke a young female on the stand to start crying. It is a very, very delicate operation.
All right, when we come back, I said it was a dramatic day, probably the most dramatic day in the trial with one of the two most important witnesses breaking down. So ultimately, who had a better day? The prosecution or defense? Our think tank will answer the question when we return. Very dramatic day inside the courtroom, but who had a better day, prosecution or defense? Let's bring back in our think tank and get a verdict tonight. We begin with Matthew Maddox, criminal defense attorney in New York.
Vinny, I think that this individual witness played perfectly into the defense narrative. I don't think they could have asked for a better foil for their cross-examination. The day went to the defense today.
Kelly Hyman, prosecution or defense today?
Defense, based on those emails, those are very damaging. And so that's why I would have to say the defense, even though she broke down, was very emotional and went through a lot.
Andrew Lynch, prosecution or defense? Who had a better day?
There's no question it was the defense. It's heartbreaking that she has to go through this, but we have to remember it's the state versus the defendant. She showed time and again that she had a reason, a motive, an interest in maintaining this relationship and that this could have been consensual.
Surrey, who had a better day, prosecution or defense?
I think the prosecution is doing great. They had a great day. They had a victim who had some singers. I mean, Harvey smells like we all know what. They're doing great.
All right, let's check back in with Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter with a look ahead to tomorrow.